All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Yamaha RIVAGE series webinar sponsored by TC Furlong. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start off with a few introductions. First off, I am Brian Grahn with the TC Furlong sales and marketing team. For those who are not aware, TC Furlong is a Chicago area-based live sound company. We handle equipment sales and rentals, live productions, and a smattering of other services, including system design, repairs, and more. We have been a Yamaha dealer for more than 20 years and have been primarily Yamaha console based on our rental side for many years, including PM5, CL, and even RIVAGE PM7. We are happy to be joined today by our Yamaha District Manager, David Venus, and Yamaha System Application Engineer, Kevin Kimmel. Thank you both for joining us today.
We're excited to be here to really show off what the RIVAGE line really is. So again, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for showing up, everybody.
Yeah. So before we get started here and I hand things over to Kevin, I do have a few announcements. We are recording today's webinar and we'll be posting later on our YouTube page. A link will be sent out to all registrants after we have processed and posted the video. We will not be monitoring the chat section of today's webinar for questions. If you do have questions, please submit them through the Q&A section of the webinar. And lastly, we do have a planned Q&A portion at the end of the webinar, but please submit your questions as we go so that we can prioritize some questions and even pose over the course of the webinar for Kevin here. So with that, I hand it over to Kevin Kimmel.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, and regarding the questions, I mean, if there's some good ones or pertinent ones that seem really important to answer at the moment they come in, go ahead and interrupt me. Let's keep it a little bit interactive if we can. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just start with a quick overview of RIVAGE in general and touch on a couple things on all the models, and then we'll dive into the new stuff because obviously we've had an exciting announcement recently. So RIVAGE PM10 was the first model, of course, that's flagship, and it had a lot of components that have come along. In here we can see the family where we see different DSPs and stage racks, both Dante based, the Rios, the Rio D2s, as well as the RPio stage racks that are TWINLANE based, and the different surfaces, of course. But the surface is the CSR10, and this surface is it mixes with the DSP-R10. It mixes 144 inputs. It's got 72 mix buses and 36 matrix outs. And then for the DSP, like in CL, of course, we've got the effects rack and the EQ rack and whatnot, and then of course the premium rack. And those are plugins. But in this system, everything is a plugin. Even the reverbs, everything is just a plugin. You've got an insert rack, and then you have a send and return type rack. And that 384 refers to the amount of DSP we allow for plugins. And some of the plugins take one slot, and some of them take up to 16. The reverbs, a couple of them are, you know, they eat that stuff up. A couple things to look at here real quickly on this surface while we have this image is we've got obviously two screens, and on the right section is a very large selected channel. There's two rows of encoders under the screens, kind of like what you know from CL, but there's two here. The top row is tied to the screens, and the second row has a button to the right of it in each bay. The banks of 12 faders are called bays. That allows you to toggle between 5 different functions on that lower row of encoders. And I point that out because it's a difference when we get to the newer models. We took away some of the hardware, and it's more screen-based, but it enabled us to make for a smaller surface that's, I think, ergonomically pretty fun to drive because you can reach everything really easily for a handful of reasons. But and then the user-defined keys to the center or the right of the center there, you can see they've got LCD windows for each one. So just a couple things, and to the right of the screens are some buttons that helps you when you're in this view, the 12-channel overview, what buses are you looking at? And because there's a different way to do it on the new surfaces. So if we look at the back of the desk, you've got the Omni ins and outs on the left-hand side here. We've got 8 mic line inputs that have the transformer modeling, and which of course has silk. We've got 8 outs and 8 AES3s. There's 2 MY card slots on every device, whether it's a console, a DSP, or a stage rack. So you can use your MY cards as needed. And on the PM10 and 7 surfaces, there's a DVI out. To the right of the MY card slots, there's some Cat5s, and that's for the console network. We created 2 proprietary networks for Rivage. A console network, which basically is a Cat5 that goes from your surface or surfaces to your DSP or DSPs, and back, connects in a ring. But each desk pretty much has its own console network. Front of house would have its own, and monitors would have its own, for that kind of thing. And then we created TWINLANE, and TWINLANE is a fiber network that connects between the DSPs and the stage racks. And I can explain that in a little bit. The architecture on those MY card slots, as you guys know, is 16 by 16 at 48K. So then, of course, we came out with the smaller surface, which is the CSR10S for small. Yamaha's known for its creative names. I kid. So basically, this surface is identical to the larger PM10 surface. It just, we lopped off the left bay. So it's 12 fewer faders, 1 fewer screen, 1 fewer little light. But otherwise, it's got the same mix capacity, because that's really all about the DSP. And on the back side, if we were to look at it, you would see it's the same. So then we've got the DSPs. And so here we show 2 of the new additions to the family. So we've got the DSP-RX, and that has a mix capacity of 120 inputs, which is the same as the current PM7 running V3, 48 mix outs, which is less than the PM7, which is 60, and then 24 matrix outs, which is the same, and the same amount of plugins. We've got the DSP-R10, which I just talked about, the mix capacity of the PM10 as you know it. And then the new big daddy, if you will, is the DSP-RX-EX, which I'll probably just refer to as the EX. And it doubles the input count of the DSP-R10 or the PM10 system as we know it or knew it to 288. The output side is the same, but you get a whole lot more plugins, slots for plugins. So that'll be for the big shows, the people who need a lot or have a lot of different users, and you want to let them have their own allotment of DSP kind of thing, that kind of thing. And then if you buy the RX, if that's all you can do to get into a TWINLANE based system, it doesn't even just into Rivage in general, not TWINLANE based, and you can't really swing or don't have the need for the EX, we have an upgrade kit. So you could get this DSP kit here, the deck DSP-RX, and load it in and bring your RX up to the specs of an EX. So that's a couple things about that. Then if we look at the back, now the back of these is all pretty much identical except the fine print in the bottom right hand corner, which is the model number. And you notice from the front they look the same. These HY slots for H for high capacity are up to 256 by 256, and we've got a handful of cards that we can put in there. We've got 2 different TWINLANE cards. We have single mode fiber and multi-mode fiber, basically based on either what you already have in the house that you're in or distance. We have 2 different Dante cards, one with sample rate conversion, one that doesn't have sample rate conversion. Those are 144 by 144, where the TWINLANE cards are 256 by 256. And we have a MADI card that is 128 by 128. The first slot is, if you're going to use TWINLANE, you need to put it in that primary IO slot 1 on the right there. If you're going to use the Dante-based system, the Dante cards can go wherever you want. If you want to do virtual sound check, it will be in the last slot. To the left of that, we see the console network ports and some other ports here, but and redundant power supplies and whatnot. But without going into too much detail, that's the DSP, and they're all, like I say, they look pretty much identical on the back. So let's see. The console network, while you can move on, that's fine, but the console network is just a pair of Cat5s, like I said, that goes from the DSP to the surface and back in the simplest system. And the TWINLANE is a fiber network that goes into that TWINLANE card or cards that you put in the back of the DSPs and the stage racks, not the RIOs, just the RPIOs. And that's 400 channels of 32-bit audio at 96K with a latency of 12 samples. On the front of this large RPIO 622 box, which is a 10-space box, it's 96 channels. You got input cards, they're mic line inputs, outputs, and AES. So there's 16 channel cards. These are RY cards because it's an RPIO. Load them up in any order, any way you want, any number of things as you wish. And the 2 MY card slots and redundant power supplies, and top left some a screen and some buttons to get around on. The Rupert Neve Silk and transformer modeling is on the input card. So if you want that, you need to go with RPIO and TWINLANE based system. It's not part of the Rios, as you probably very well know. When you see the Rio D2s on the right there, the 3224 D2 and the 1608 D2. So that would be for the Dante based systems. You can mix and match. You'd want to mind your latency. We can talk about that. If you guys get into designing some systems, you can feel free to reach out to me. I can help you on design stuff and considerations where the best places to put your cards, because you have some options and things like that. So let's see. From here, the back of the units, on the back of the RPIO there, you can see there's 2 of the HY card slots. So the first slot, if you're using TWINLANE, the first slot's always going to be your main IO. So that would be TWINLANE, and the second card could be for a Dante card or a MADI card. And in one TWINLANE loop, you could have 8 of these stage racks, any combination of the 2 different stage racks, but you can have up to 400 channels and up to 8 stage racks in one loop. And if you run out, if you've got a big, let's say a big property, and you want to drop 10 or 12 boxes in different buildings or something, you could add a second snake on each of these systems, except the PM7 system doesn't allow for a sub snake and a second TWINLANE loop, but that would get you 800 channels and 16 stage racks if you had that need. So and then here we just have a quick overview of a Dante system and a TWINLANE based system. Yeah, so the main thing to remember when putting together, if you're looking to design a system for Rivage, is that any of these work surfaces can work with any of the DSPs, with the single exception being the PM7 surface. That DSP is built in, so it's got its own kind of rules in that regard. But I don't think I need to go over too much of the detail here in these systems. They're probably familiar to you. We make switches, and we've got editor and monitor mixes available with this version 4, a big thing, in a new stage mix version as well. So in a nutshell, there's just a couple overviews there of a TWINLANE based and a Dante based system. So from there, I think maybe from there, we want to look at the PM7 and just know that this surface is pretty much identical to the 10. It's got a different wood on it, and it's got fewer buses, so there's fewer buttons to the right of the screens, which get you to different sets of buses. But as a workflow, and if you were to be blindfolded, and if you knew how to use the PM10 surface, you could use this one blindfolded as well. The workflow and all that stuff is the same. The main difference is the channel count based on that internal DSP in version 3. These are version 3 numbers. And then the DSP is behind the screen on the left. So while the PM10 offers a small surface, the PM7 won't, because the DSP is built in. We need that realistic. So, and one other important difference between the 10 and the 7 is the DSP-R10 has the TC electronic reverbs in it. It's got a couple of reverbs on the 6000 series, and that's not part of the 7, and it's not part of the new DSP. So if you're putting something together and you just live and die by the TC reverb, which I totally understand, then design, even if you pick one of the newer surfaces, go ahead and use the existing DSP, because then you won't have to have outboard TC electronic stuff for the reverbs. So that's another differentiator between the PM10 DSP, the DSP-R10, it's not specific to PM10 anymore, and the newer DSPs, and the PM7 as well.
Hey, Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here real quick. We've got a couple questions.
Oh, yeah, great.
So Philip asked, do you need to run Dante TWINLANE to the surface to use local I/O?
No, the local I/O, well, I guess it depends on the situation. I mean, if you have an RF rack sitting at, let's say, front of house, you can use this local I/O as analog I/O or AES I/O without Dante or TWINLANE at that point. I mean, so no, you don't need to run. TWINLANE goes between the DSP and the stage racks, and Dante goes wherever you want, basically wherever you want Dante. So that would be from the DSP, most likely from the DSP to Rios, I would guess. Although you can put a Dante card in the back of an RPIO, in which case, so when people are designing systems, if they think they're going to utilize a lot of Dante things, let's say they're going to go with an RPIO or a TWINLANE based system, but maybe the drive is going to be by way of Dante, then I would recommend maybe the best path, and it depends on the existing cable paths you already have, could be to put a Dante card, an HY Dante card, in the back of the RPIO, as opposed to let's say if your DSP is with your desk at front of house. So I generally say just run both, because there's so much speed and so much ease with TWINLANE, and there's so much versatility with the patching capabilities, let alone third-party stuff of TWINLANE or of Dante. So I think a combination of the two, even if you're just going to pick one stage rack or the other, is a good idea.
Another question here. So can I use the new DSP-EX with RIVAGE Editor in standalone mode and some units of RPIO without surfaces, kind of like the DSP-5D with soft editor?
No, I think you need to have the surface. Yeah, I don't think, well, I don't know. I don't know the exact answer to that, because I've never tried it, although I used to joke early on that, it's all about the out, so tip the desk and work off editor and, or stage mix and let the band see you exiting. So maybe, but I don't think it'd be a great idea. It'd be hard to do a lot of things just in editor, and there's some things you cannot do in editor. So you can do most everything, but you're going to want a surface.
Cool. That's it for now.
Let's see. From where were we? So the back of this desk is pretty much the same as the PM10 desk, except you have the DSP on the right, and this DSP only has 3 of those HY slots. So, and again, note that we have the transformer modeling in silk on these mic line inputs on the back of the 7 and 10 surfaces. That is a difference with the new surfaces, which we'll take a look at in a minute. And both of these, the 7 and 10 surfaces, have a DVI out for a third screen. And that's another difference as well. So, so that's basically the south side of the PM7. Now that was version 3 specs. This is version 3 specs here, 120 by 60 by 824. But with V4, the PM7 owners or people who want to buy PM7 because they need an internal DSP due to lack of space, let's say, you're not losing out. You're getting your inputs bumped from 120 to 144. The mix buses stays the same, but we give you another 12 matrix outs. Then the DSP for the plug-in stuff is the same, and then you get everything else that comes along with V4 as well. So there's a serious bump here for the PM7 system, just as a standalone. It's pretty happening. So yeah, so that's that. And then let's see, from there, I think we want to jump over to the PM5 surface. So this is the larger of the 2 new surfaces. It's a little bit less wide than the PM7 and PM10 surface. It's not nearly as deep. Front to back is really shallow, if you will. And when we achieve that a handful of ways, which I'll talk about in a second, but here you can see we've got 3 screens. The selected channel where we had all those knobs on the right-hand side and LCD screens and whatnot and encoders on the PM10 surface or 7 surface is now more screen-based, and because we condensed the selected channel, the number of knobs and buttons is fewer. And also across the bottom, under the screens rather, there's not 2 rows of encoders, there's 1. So then you go, okay, well, if it's RIVAGE, and there's 100% file compatibility amongst the entire family. So obviously, if you go from a file you built on a DSP with a larger channel count when you go downstream, of course, some things will fall by the wayside. Or if you go from a DSP-R10 file and you put it into another DSP, you're going to lose the TC reverb. So you just load up another reverb. But other than that, the compatibility is 100%. And there's not a separate file starting with version 4 for a PM5 and a PM3 and a 10 and a 7. It's just a RIVAGE file, throw it in and go. But because the workflow is slightly different on these consoles, then we'll go over how you achieve some of the maneuvers and how that goes on these new surfaces compared to the way you would do it on a 10. On the back side, there's 8 mic ins, 8 outs, and only 4 AES. So there's fewer AES, and these mic line inputs on both the new surfaces do not have the transformer modeling in silk. You still have the 2 MY card slots. And there's the console network, of course. There's not a DVI out, redundant power supplies. The GPIO is 8 in, 8 out on these systems. Bunch of USB ports, MIDI in and out, etc. So that's the back of the PM5. And then for the 3, so this surface is only 4 inches wider than a CL5. It's got 1 screen. There's no DVI out for the 3rd screen, or 2nd screen rather, but it's someone from a distance or who didn't look real carefully might look at it and go, it's a CL. it does look a fair amount like a CL, but this thing is Rivage through and through. Now you can run a Dante system. If this is all you can do to get to the platform, I'd say get a CS3 and some Rio D2s. But if you can swing it with the RPio, you could use the EX DSP on this and do 288 channels on this thing. So it's the selected channels to the right of the screen here, and a lot of user-defined keys to the right, scene managements to the right, stuff like that. But it still has 38 faders. It's a tighter pack of faders. And the channel name strips are here. The metering is above, like they are in CL. That was really about cost saving and real estate and making it fit into this package. But it's a great way. If we did look at the back of this, or did we not? Maybe we didn't. I don't know. I think maybe we didn't yet. So on the back of this, you've got the 8 in and 8 out, but there's no AES back here. We have the MY card slots, of course, but there's not AES built in. And as I mentioned before, the transformer modeling in Silk isn't here. You have the cards, the MY card slots, and the rest of it's the same as the other surfaces. So any more questions? How are we doing there? Doing all right?
Helps if I unmute myself, right? Basics of a webinar. So I have a question here. With TWINLANE, if you're using a front of house monitor and broadcast console, are you sharing the same gain structure?
You are, of course, yeah, because there's a one head amp. And so really the main thing there, and I thought maybe we blew it there because nobody likes to share, right? We're kind of control freaks as sound guys. And it wasn't so much about sharing the head amp. That's not a huge deal. It works the way the gain compensation works the same as CL. So if you're familiar with the way we do that on CL and Rios and the QL as well, it works flawlessly as far as it's really about understanding or agreeing on a gain structure. Number one, who's going to drive and who's going to recall the mic breeze. The other consideration here would be that you're also sharing Silk and the transformer modeling. And this is the part where I was concerned about early on. And I set out to prove the engineers wrong that we should have transformer and Silk compensation the same as we have gain compensation. But I'll save, because of time, I'll save you the story. But in doing lots of testing and experimenting and gigs, and now I've done hundreds of bands with these consoles, it's a non-issue in almost all cases. So it really comes down to usually making the artist happy. You know, I'd say more than anybody. As you know, or maybe you don't, I'll talk about Silk if you like. But there's a tonal quality and there's a dimensional quality. As you saturate the transformer with the Silk or the texture knob, the image gets wider and deeper and things like that. And red will get you more high mids and highs, and blue will get you a fatter, warmer, thicker, warmer sound. And it can be a subtle thing. It just depends on how you apply it. But in all cases where I had someone else driving and I was trying to not pay and wasn't paying attention to what he was doing with Silk and the transformer, I kept thinking that something was going to get too bright or too dark or too fat or something like that, and it just kept getting better. So it's almost a complete non-issue.
Awesome. Man, we have a lot of questions coming in, so this is great. We have another one here. It says, what can you actually assign to the third screen on the PM7 and 10?
Well, it's meant to be the screen for the selected channel, but it doesn't have to be. So in each of these systems, we have the ability to isolate one bay from the other bay, so a whole section of the desk, or just one screen. So here I've got the new Eventide reverb, and if I feel like I need to get that a lot, I can lock off this screen, so as I select channels and do things, that stays there, because maybe I need to change reverb times or something like that. Or it could be an EQ for a pastor, or it could be any number of things. It could be an oscillator during a line check. So you have the ability to put anything there and isolate it if you want to. Otherwise, it will follow the selected channel. So, but you can, and with version 4, there's so much more flexibility in what you can do in the way of what gets linked to what. They can be completely independent. I can go to sends on faders here, and I'm not in sends on faders in these. Things like that. That's actually pretty straight ahead, but there's so much variance now that we can do. There's not too many restrictions.
Yeah. Someone asked why less card slots on the PM series than the CL series.
I think because we have with the basic with a basic TWINLANE based system, you'll have 6 MY card slots, 2 on the desk, 2 on the DSP, and 2 in the stage rack. If you need more, of course we have the RSIO, we call it the bento box, RSIO 64. That is, you've got 4 card slots with sample rate conversion and native Dante on it. So whether you need a network bridge or just more MY card slots, but most folks that get into these systems aren't using so much of the MY card slots because there's so much stuff built in here, and we have Dante and Matty cards, and those, along with the TWINLANE, take care of many of the needs. Dugan's got 64 channels of Dugan built in. There's, it just depends, but yeah, that hasn't been an issue with anyone that I know of.
Okay, great. I guess we can go ahead and keep moving forward here. We can come back to a few more questions here in a few minutes.
Okay, yeah, just chime in anytime. I'm not going to get to cover anything, but I'll try to do some highlights here. So maybe am I going to the camera now? I forget what's coming up.
Yeah, let's take a look at the desk now.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. So I talked about there's so many things to cover. There's 2 rows of encoders on the 7 and the 10. The top row's tied to the screen. Like we know from CL, you highlight a row, and these encoders are that. The second row of encoders, there's a selectable, you can toggle up and down through 5 different functions. And then those encoders are for that. We only have 1 row of encoders, but we don't want to lose any of the functionality. So we have this encoder assign button. So on the other surfaces, these features, or whatever features you choose, it can be well over 100 things, you would toggle on the second row. So here, I'll come over and I bookmark this. I can come in and I can change these, but whatever I set here, this is where I can determine what these are. So right now, I have selected screen encoder. So when I touch on something, it highlights, and here are the knobs for my EQ or for whatever it is I touch. But if I want it to be digital gain, now these encoders are for digital gain for these channels. It could be a head amp, it could be any of the things you can assign to it. It could be silk, it could be any number of things. One other thing I talked about was the comfort of driving these consoles. They're narrower. This console is so much less deep, I guess I should say. We've got nicer, in my opinion, much nicer metering here. There's stereo meters. We've got dynamic 1 and 2 meters here as well. And we lost the name, the channel name and color bar, and the meters that were up here. That enabled us to make this much closer. So, I mean, it's really not very far from the armrest to the screen. And I thought I was going to absolutely hate. I went to Japan ready to just fight and fall on my sword over not having that. But in fact, these read much better than these do, in my opinion. And it helps me keep my eye on the artist, whether I'm doing monitors or doing front of house. And depending on what you have open and what you selected with this encoder, these get really large. So they read really well, and you can put the icons in there if you want them. I tend to not use them. But another thing that is handy is the we know we have sends on faders. I can go to sends on faders in this bay here, and we can see, same as you would know from CL, I could choose my mixes or matrices here. But I sometimes, especially if you're front of house, you want to get to a send and you don't want to go to sends on faders. And maybe you don't even want to go to this view. But if you did go to this view, while we're on this view, on the other consoles, I pointed out the row buttons that were to the right of the screens, and that's how you would select what buses you're looking at. We have an awful lot of buses in this. On this version and with this console, because we don't have that hardware, we have this shift key. So if I press and hold shift, now those buses come up here and I can say, hey, I want 49 to 60, and that's what I have on the surface, that kind of thing. So it's a way to manage that. And another thing is the user-defined knobs. We don't have the hardware user-defined knobs on these new surfaces that we have on the 7 and 10 surface, but we do have this send and user-defined knobs, assign button and encoder. And it's a little washed out here, but this is whatever I select. Let me just push this. So maybe I want to go to sends on faders. I don't want to go to sends on faders, and I don't even want to go to this view. I want to keep a selected channel here or a reverb or something else. I can come here and I can scroll around and get to all of my buses, and I could say, hey, mix 27 for this selected channel, it could grab my touch and turn knob, but I could just come in and say, I want to bring it up that much. And so I have pan and I have level on and off, and we'll probably add pre and post. Green is pre, orange is post. So at a glance, I can see how I'm doing here, where you see that to the right of the screen on your knobs on a PM10 or 7 surface. And then I have user-defined knobs. I've got 4 banks of those, and I can come in and I can assign them whatever I choose here, you know, is what I get on, it's hard to read, but it is what I get on the screen there. And it's just too much reflection in here, sorry. But you get the point. And so it's a pretty great, it's just another way to do things. It's pretty, I don't know, I find it ergonomically, I like it, it's good. Here we can see the selected channel. So we've got the EQ. We don't have the LCD screens and all that stuff under each encoder, but that got us space. Dynamics, we don't have an individual set of knobs and buttons for Dynamics 1 and 2. I have 1 and 2, like we know from some of our smaller consoles. User-defined keys and navigation stuff. So here's my navigation. So as you would expect, we can get to every channel in every bay, and you can't start, and you don't have to program and put channels on the desk. Whatever you do, patch, it's there. It's already there, and it defaults to 1 to 12. If I do this, there's 1 to 72, and I come over to my second one here, and that gets me to 144. And then I've got my mix masters. So I've got 72 mix masters, and my matrix outs. I can get my stereo buses here, and also my Q and monitor. We've got 2 Q buses and 2 monitor buses on these systems. Custom fader, there's 24 DCAs. We have DCA rollout, so if I select a DCA, it will roll out to an adjacent bay or 2, depending on what I choose. And then for custom fader banks, like on a CL5, you've got 9, and they're scene dependent. Here they're not scene dependent, at least not yet, but there's so many of them. And the console will remember when you store or update a scene, what comes back. So basically we're in the previous version, we had in version 3 on the consoles, we had a 1 and a 2 times 6 here for the custom fader banks. If I went to custom, so there's a 1 and a 2, and then custom, it just isn't reading so washed out, sorry, but it's my custom fader banks, which I can name. And that got me 144 customizable faders per bay. But now we've got not just 2, but we have 5 times 6 times 12. So we have, what's that, 360 or something like that? I don't know, my math isn't so good, but we have a ton of custom fader banks. The user-defined keys, we have 4 banks of them. On the other models, the bigger models, we have more room. We have one of these windows for each button. Here we've added lots of color, and if we keep these to, you can't see it, but if you keep it to 5 digits or less, you get a large font here. They read really well. My scene management stuff, there's an overlay feature. If we don't run out of time, I can explain. Let's see. Gosh, that's not everything by a long shot. There's a bunch. I'll show you one other thing, real cool thing. Let's see if I bookmarked it. Yeah, here's where I can come in and change how my screens work. Now this is on all of the consoles except the small PM10 surface and the PM3, because it only has 1 screen. But this represents the selected, my select key and my Q select. What do I want to link? Do I want to link maybe these 2 bays? So if I go to sends on faders, they both flip, and I have DCAs or maybe outputs here if I'm doing monitors, whether it sends on fader or my send block or my shift key. Channel, there's so many different things that you can link. And also the default is for the right screen to be the selected channel screen, but I could even say, hey, I want to work in the middle and make this my selected channel. So it can be, this console is a great console. So is the 10 surface for a for 2-man operation, because you've got 2 Q buses and whatnot. So there's so much you can do here, and there on surface settings. And on top of that, we've got 4 banks of settings. So this might be, the main sound guy, let's say at a church, and this could be other users, and you load in, you can come in and load your user setup, your preferences. So, or it could be, I don't know, opening act, main act, or it could be line check, sound check, show, some other thing. So there's a lot you can do there. Let's see. So that I don't totally leave it out, I should jump over to the 3. So everything I've talked about you can do here. You're just limited to one screen. And so again, it's small. If I've got a CL across the way, it's just a little bit bigger. This console, the PM3, is actually a little bit deeper than the PM5 console. This is the interior. This is the frame on the 5 is aluminum. This is only like 90, I don't know, I want to say 94 pounds, and this is like 84 pounds, something like that. So they're very lightweight and easy to use. But you can see this is very familiar. In each of the Rivage series, even the PM10 and 7, all of this looks familiar to users. I've been told by many people who jumped in from CLQL, it's not so intimidating because there's so much that you recognize. Here's the Eventide reverb. Really cool thing here is it's just another palette. This has been a workhorse in the industry and recording, especially since the 80s, 83, 84. But there's a lot of really good presets in here from some pretty famous people. So there's some really good starting points in here. So let's see. I've been talking a bunch. Any questions? Oh, I'll show you one other thing. Before I do that, you talk about, so this console I currently have on the DSP-R10. This console I have on the EX. So this is set up to do 288 channels. So if I come out of the custom faders, you go, well, how in the world do you get to 288 here when you only showed me 144 before? Touch both of these, and they go to blue, and now I'm through 216. If I go to my second layer up above, I'm through 288. So it's they read really well when they go from blue to green. So you pretty easily know what layer you're on. There's a lot of user-defined keys here. Again, it has all the colors. My scene management stuff is here. So I've been talking a lot. Any questions?
Yeah, there are quite a few. I'm going to start with some of the easier ones. There's a lot based around, I think, a lot of specific situations. So
okay.
I might actually save those for the very, very end. So just please be patient, guys. But Seth asked, can they name the I/O?
Yeah, well, yeah, you can do that. You can go in and you can name the ports, and you have the ability to name the ports and the boxes. So in system config, you have port name. So here, if I come into port name, I can name my TWINLANE devices. M1 would be my first stage rack. I can name Dante devices, DSPs, consoles, control surfaces, etc. This RPIO number 1, M1 would be my first stage rack. I can name the box, stage left and stage right. I can name the 16-channel RY cards, and then I can name the ports. And then the other thing I can do is I can put on a user-defined key the ability to toggle through my names. So I think I may have put it on here somewhere. I think it's in here somewhere. Yeah, so if I toggle, I'm looking at the channel name as I named it. There, I haven't gone in and done, you can see I haven't named them yet, but you can see, or it will tell me, hey, it's the first box, the first RY card, number 5 or 6 or 7, and so on. So just with toggling on a user-defined key, you can see everything. And the other thing that gives you is in the patch, it would give you your names. And so if you're familiar with the PM1D and how we used to name units and cards and whatnot, it shows up in your patch. In addition to your channel names, this is the stuff that's in the system, so you get to see them named here as well.
What are the USB ports used for other than storing setup files on 2-track record?
Yeah, so we have on the front, we have 2. So one is loading, saving, and updates, your 2-track recording and playback, and on the back there's 3 more, and those could be a keyboard, a mouse, maybe you're doing updates from the back, things like that.
Awesome. Seth asked, will we be developing a script dolly?
We have the drawing for a script dolly for the PM10 and PM7 surfaces. We have that now. If you write to me, I can get you the, I don't know, it's probably a parts list. We don't make it. We're not in that business, and because that's a very specific thing to the users we've found. So I can get you information on things to consider to use and even a parts list, but we don't make it. And I suspect it is possible here. On the other surfaces, I can show you on the PM10. I've got my computer sitting over here. But on the PM10 surface here, this looks like a missing part, kind of thing along here. It's actually a tray for the wheels that would sit. It would sit here and here. We don't have that on the smaller surfaces, the new ones. So, but there's a nice seam here, so I imagine you still could do it. It's so small, you may want to just have some external arm, kind of like the way I have something like this for that. But
awesome. Palmer asked, do Shure microphones send data to channel screens like they do on the CL console?
not yet, but I suspect that not too far down the road, we're going to see some of that OSC type control come into this series. So we're slated to get more control of things like that. So I think it's not too far down the road.
Awesome. We've got a question here. It says, do the names from the cards port to the channel when patched, or do you have to name again? You
need to name the ports the way I just showed you a minute ago.
Okay. Go ahead and keep going here, and I'll save some of these questions here for the end.
Okay. Let's see. What are some of the other cool things in here? I look at some notes I had. There's a bunch of stuff. I were just to go in here. So if we wanted to look at just go to a main setup screen and system config. Here I can look as an overview of what's happening with the system. So I see my control surface. I could see a second one if I had it here. I can see the DSP and what type it is. These little green lights indicate that my connections, in this case for my console network, are good. I can see both power supplies are on. I can see what card slots are in there, or in this case, what I loaded up virtually. That's the yellow there. And I can see that my connectivity, my optical power, I can see it looks good on both the in and the out. And I don't see it here because they're not connected, and I can see my MY card slots. If I wanted to load something in Editor and work in advance or on a surface in advance, I can come into my MY card library and load up a Lake card or whatever. So there's a pretty good selection of the cards that you can pick, and then you would see them there. If you load them up, it automatically recognizes here's where I can look at overall HY slot 1. If I had a TWINLANE card in there like I do now, I can see how many channels are coming from my stage rack. In this case, I've got 80, and I've got 36 coming from my DSP that makes 116 of the 400 available. And if I had loaded up other cards, or if I had other RPIOs, I'd see that. Slot 2, I don't have anything in this one, but if I went in and loaded either, it could be TWINLANE or my Dante cards or my Matty card, I could load it up and I would see it here. And then this looks probably familiar to you. One of the things that comes along with version 4 is the ability to load and control up to 48 devices, not just 24. The other thing that's cool in this system is the patch. I showed it briefly before, but here across in this case, we're looking at input patch, and I can see all my inputs here, and I can scroll up and down very, very quickly here. I can look at input A. Every input has a B input. I can look at input B or A and B by selecting here. And then this is what's in my system. M1 is my first stage rack. The small things there would be the console. HY2 would be a Dante card. That's 144 channels there. Another 144 channels. Another 144 channels. This is probably some effects that I loaded up. I can do return outputs to mix to inputs, like a sub-in type of thing. So it's very, very wide. I can scroll back and forth very quickly. I could just grab it here. It's hard for me to do left-handed, but we can see things moving along there. And then when I want to do a patch, I get this vertical and horizontal line. Wherever they meet is my cursor. So if I want to start and do a patch from here on, there's a bit of an auto patch, but you choose the beginning and end point. And just touch here, and I scroll with my touch and turn, and I just determine how far across in my system or how many channels down I want to go, and hit the green button, and I just made that patch. I don't want to steal my patch now, but that's just a little thing. And it's the same for output, direct out, but it's also the same for my my Dante patch. We made it the same. So patching on the system is very, very quick and easy. Any other questions?
Yeah, so Dennis actually asked, instead of having to use the editor, will you be able to have an Excel sheet load for channels, groups, and aux names?
If I'm not mistaken, you can do that now. So if I go to setup, let's see. If I go to setup, same as with the CL and QL, you can import, export a CSV file. So I recommend you start from the desk first, so you have the formatting and you get the colors and everything. You can do it. You can do that. You've been able to do that for a while, if I'm not mistaken, by way of the CSV import or export.
Andrew asked, he's interested in having a switch at front of house with both Dante and console control networks running via fiber to the DSP or RPIO on stage. Did you say the console control network is a ring?
Yes, both the console network and TWINLANE connect in a ring. But they are separate. So the console network, most people keep the DSP with the desk. You don't have to. You've got a 100-meter limit on that. So most people will keep the DSP with the desk. Could be cabling reasons. Could be that they want the HY slots with them. But so then you run your fiber from your DSP to the RPIOs and back in a ring for redundancy. So you cannot, let's say you put a Dante card in the back in slot 2 of an RPIO, and then you put a Rio in, I don't know, Video Village backstage or something. You would be able to get the signal to and from the Rio, but you wouldn't have head amp control of a Dante device over TWINLANE. At least not yet. I think it's technically possible, but it's not there. I know it's not exactly what you're asking, but I don't know that the third-party control will be operational at least day one when we introduce it over TWINLANE.
We've got another one here. It says, when using a RIVAGE and a CL, can you use the silk on the RPIO and with a Dante card port the silk treated channels to the CL to gain that benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've already done lots of gigs like that. So yeah, absolutely you can do that and whether you're taking a direct out or just a Dante patch to them. It's just a Dante patch and they have their local digital gain at the CL side. Yep.
Here's a good one. How does a redundant system work with one RPIO, 2 DSPs, and 1 surface?
So if you want to have a backup engine or a mirror mode or redundant engine, you would have to have the exact same model. So if you're running an RX, you would have a second RX. If you're running it with TWINLANE in slot 1, you would have to have the same exact card configuration as well and same firmware versions in both DSPs. So both the HY cards and the MY card configuration in both DSPs would have to be matched. And then it becomes part of the console network. It's the Cat5 loop, basically. You just add the second engine in. And then if you wanted to switch, you can do it either in the GUI or you can put it on a user-defined key, or you could even do it with the GPIO.
So have somebody asking about the monitor output and can it be configured for discrete downmix for Dolby in 5.1 or 7.2? He's asking, would you have bass management control?
I think that we do have some of that, but I don't know about separate bass management control unless you just put that on separate out. So we do have, let me see here. There is, for example, we've got, we have, did it wrong? Looking at the wrong thing. We have left, right, center, down mix. I don't know about separate bass management control per se. Not anything that calls it that. It could just be a separate, bus that you assign for that. I'm pretty sure that is correct. But send me an email and I'll dive into it deeper and get you an absolute answer if you like. You can write to these guys at TC and they'll connect us.
Absolutely. Palmer asked, I have a situation where I use a smaller console in a control booth for some shows and a larger console. Oh, sorry, it just bumped on me. And a larger console in the house for bigger shows. Could I buy one DSP and RPIO and swap them back and forth between a CSR3 in the booth and a CSR5 in the house as needed? Would the DSP get confused?
No. So I guess what I don't know is if you want to use them both at the same time. But no, when you go in and when you connect to a system, basically in the main setup, you would come in and say, hey, what mode do I want to be in? And here's where you would pick what DSP and your ID and what surface you are. So it's not a problem at all. And even if you wanted to run both at the same time, you can do it. I mean, it's you can have two consoles share a DSP, but there'd have to be some choreography there. We usually don't recommend it, but technically it is absolutely possible, and it's even being done on a few big tours. But they're on their game, and you'd have to be on your game and mind your DSP usage and whatnot. But yeah, you can do that.
I have a question here. If working with a system under 144 channels, sharing RPIOs, Rio wireless mics with PM and CL consoles, I would like to use only Dante and no TWINLANE, especially if the DSP and RPIOs are in the same rack. Is this possible with TWINLANE cards and one fiber jumper to connect the DSP to the RPIO? My understanding is that it is not currently possible.
I might need you to read that one to me again, because I thought he said he didn't want to use TWINLANE or didn't want to use RPIO. How did you start that question again?
So he said he's sharing RPIO and Rios wireless mics all with a PM and a CL console. So I'm reading this as obviously so TWINLANE is being utilized for the RPIO.
Yep.
Dante. So obviously having to have two networks to basically have both Rios and RPIOs on the same system, correct?
Yeah, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. Couple considerations. Some people maybe try to save money and thinking they'll take, and maybe they or think about the advantages to keeping your RFs digital. So they'll use Dante, for example, and that'll save them some money because maybe they're not buying quite as many of the mic pre's in the analog input cards that have the silk, but you're going to want silk on your RFs probably. So that's one thing to consider. But yeah, either way, you can use both. Considerations would be latency, because you have a different latency. Dante's slower than TWINLANE, and so you just have to mind what you plug into what kind of box if you want to mix and match and run them both at the same time. You can do it. I don't think there'd be any problems so long as you didn't run left side of some kind of playback into a Rio and the other into an RPIO. Or if you did do that, you'd have some smearing, and you just have to back up the time on the TWINLANE side. But you can do it. And one other real cool feature that we have in these consoles is delay compensation. So we have the ability, because every time you add an insert, we have all kinds of plug-in capabilities on these systems. We have the ability to set our delay compensation or choose to use compensation based on the input inserts. And on the right, we have the output inserts. And then in the middle, we have the buses, which would be different paths like parallel compression. And so at 96K, with all of it turned on, I'm sitting at 5.28 milliseconds. And when I'm doing monitors, I will often turn this off and I'm running it on my mixes. I'm at 1.78 milliseconds. Well, that's not going to mess with anybody. So that's another thing that goes to the great sound on these systems and helps. I know it's a little bit off exactly what you're asking about, but that is another great feature on these desks.
It's great, Kevin. And you mentioned some of the plugins now. Can you show us some of the cool plugins that are on the RIVAGE series?
Sure. On this one channel here, I was messing around. We have, there's 2 inserts per channel, 4 plugins per. So you can have 8 plugins per channel if you really want to go there. But if I wanted to add something, here's a vintage Rupert EQ. It's this vintage 70s Rupert, EQ, and it's our model 773, including his transformer modeling and the ability to drive it. If I go to the second insert, it's the vintage 80s Rupert EQ, and then there's the Portico, of course. If I wanted to add something else, I could come in and say, hey, I want to mount And hang on, I'm going to plug in my power. Give me one sec. Sorry for the view. And sorry about that. And I want to mount something. And then I've got reverbs and delays and modulators, EQ, dynamic saturation, and then graphic EQs and peak EQs. So all the stuff from saturation over uses this 384 slots of DSP. And so far I've used 100. So that's my gas gauge for the plugins. And then I've got graphic EQs, parametric EQs with notches, as well as if I was going to use an outboard piece of gear. So my reverbs, I can see the Eventide and the TC reverbs and the SPX 2000 stuff, REV-X, etc. Delays and modulators, an old Bucket Brigade delay from Yamaha. It's pretty cool. The Eventide H3000 harmonizer, not that I would insert it. Here it shows where it's going to be mounted within the DSP, if you will. And I just say, okay, and I have it. If I wanted to change it, I could come up and I could go to something else. And so we've got a lot of the devices you know from the CL and QL series. The GUI is nicer here. The math is the same. We have a 4-band dynamic EQ in addition to the 2-band. The ones that are grayed out are stereo, and I'm on a mono channel at the moment. Dynamics, again, we got vintage 70s Rupert devices and vintage 80s, as well as Portico and then some. So there's a veritable plethora of things. Another really cool one, so is some other of his stuff. One really cool one that we have is this dance noise suppression device. And basically it's a device where you can clean up. It's got 6 floating filters. You pick the range, you tell it to learn. Now I don't have signal on this channel right now, but it learns, and it's an 8-second average. And while it's counting down, it's finding whatever it thinks it needs to do. And then once it's done, you can then modify it. You could change the band that you did, the band with which you did. You could link it and say, hey, maybe it's a little aggressive. I'm going to back it off a little bit or increase it. And there's a tightness, which is effectively the hold time or the release time. And so, it is the whole time. So, or I could, hey, I screwed it up, let's start over or change it. This is amazing for lecterns and lavs and headsets, or anytime you've got noise in the room. It does it dynamically, as opposed to that 5045, the Rupert Neve 5045, which does it dynamically. Plus, you have its transformers, a whole different way of working. It's also good on getting rid of Riz in a guitar. If you just can't get rid of the Riz in a guitar amp, I've seen it used. There's a guy, we're going to take a look at a video. When we're done here, we're going to roll a couple guys that I had over to the house when I had these in my house and talk about what they think. And Coach, who is Steely Dan's guy, uses this extensively, and he showed me how he cleaned up a guitar, buzz on a guitar rig with this. I mean, it's a fascinating device.
Kevin, we had a question about can the 2 inserts be at different places in the channel? Can you show the pick-off points for the inserts?
Yeah, so we have, when we look at the signal flow here for the channel, we can see not only the gain structure going throughout the channel, but maybe you don't mount up so many things like I have here as an experiment, but you go, I'm going to put a compressor and an EQ. Well, which one do you want first? Well, if you had them side by side, you'd have to unmount and remount, but this one, you can move your insert point around. Maybe you want the second insert in front of the first insert. Things like that. And you can do that with your delay and your direct outs as well.
That's great. So I have one more question that I think I've seen a couple times here. So what is the availability of the new consoles?
Oh, there is that. Yeah. So the PM5 is going to come along first. I think we'll see that. So when we get stuff from Japan, we have a tendency, not a tendency, as a rule, we will put it through our own QC, which can be weeks long. We like to just really double check. You know, we're obviously pretty conservative and careful here. I'm not sure if anybody else in the world does it, but we'll do it with each piece that comes in. So the consoles will be available. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, they could find, if they find a bug, they got a lot of checking to do again. And version 4 isn't quite done yet. So I would guess, you know, I've been saying summer. I think it'll be, it could be this month. It could be this month, late this month. It depends on how the development of version 4 goes. The surface is pretty solid. I'm not even on the latest version, and it's pretty dang solid. So The smaller desk, the PM3, will be coming out this fall. I would guess that'll be late September, October, even my guess. And the DSP will be coming along in probably, I would guess it'll be, if I were guessing, I'd say mid-July. Don't hold me to it, but I would say it'll be mid-July. So the day that these become available, and we're starting to check them now, but the day that the consoles become available, you can buy it and use it with the DSP-R10 once version 4 comes out. So
that's great.
Yeah, so it's really about making sure our firmware is solid, and we're pretty conservative that way.
Yeah, guys, and you can actually direct all pricing and availability questions to Brian and his team over at TC Furlong. You said sales@tcfurlong.com, correct, Brian?
That is correct, and I'm actually going to pull that up right now here.
Actually, it looks like we actually had 2 questions that kind of came up here at the end of this, both
Sure.
actually kind of to do with Dugan. So Seth asked if there has been any changes to the Dugan automix functions with Rivage.
No, just it's 64 channels. So, but functionality is the same. I don't remember on CL what all you can put on a user-defined key, but you have the ability to put a number of things on a user-defined key here. So I don't know that it's different, but it's, as you know, it's great.
That's it for questions.
Cool. So yeah, so there's 3 guys that I think we've got very short videos of them talking about their first view of a PM3 surface. There's Randy Lane, not in this order, but there's Randy Lane from Clary. He's a systems guy. He goes out and he does recording and different things for them. He's done a plethora of things with the biggest names over the years, whether he's working in the shop and getting stuff ready for someone, or he's going out and doing a live recording or something like that, or mixing the show. Also, Robert, we'll call him Coach. Coach, everybody knows him as Coach. Nobody knows his name anyway. He's Steely Dan and Paul Simon's sound guy. And both these guys are PM10 users, as well as Gary Brown, who's out with Fish and Trey Anastasia and some others. He'll mention it in his intro, I think. So, and they're all power, especially Gary. He's a super power user on Rivage and on the PM10s. And I kind of gave him a sneak preview of PM3. And I think when we're done here, probably have some videos, just very short videos of their testimonial of what they think.
Yeah, so before we roll to the video here, I do want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and also thank you, Kevin and David, for your time, and everyone from Yamaha for helping out with this.
Yeah,
also, a big thank you to Matt Calera from the TC Furlong team that was helping to facilitate the technical side of today's webinar. As Kevin and David mentioned, if you have any questions about pricing or additional technical questions that you'd like us to pass along to Kevin, please email us at the sales@tcfurlong.com email address that's here on the screen. We also do have a brief survey that will be linked on the Zoom exit page here, and there will be a chance to enter additional questions there. So we hope you found value in today's presentation. And so, as Kevin mentioned, I'm going to roll some video here of some recent testimonials.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Hi, Randy Lane. I work for Clare Global in the engineering and the research and development department. Also been a front of house mixer for about 30 plus years. We won't say exactly how many. Just looking at the new PM3, and in the space of the CL series, which is, being used on a lot of tours that are surprising, some rather large tours along the way, we now have the capability of taking the Rivage series out in there and fitting within the same space and the same budget. So this is a great capability and a huge step up as far as being able to, take some of the acts that really couldn't, either because of space or because of budget, be able to use the Rivage line. Well, now that excuse is gone. So now we can take the reliability and the sound quality of the Rivage series out on some of the other tours that probably wouldn't have been able to do a PM10. And with the new Rivage series that's out, we have the capability of doing 288 channels now. So that bumps up our channel count to where tours can take this console, and so that means that we no longer have to worry about the limitations of budget and space because we still have that number of channels in this small frame. I've used PM10s and PM7s for years now. Reliability is great. It enables us to actually up our game as far as the sound quality and reliability out on the road, and the PM3 is going to be a great addition to that because of being able to use it in a lot more environments now.
So hi, I'm Michael Connor, mix Steely Dan and Paul Simon. I'm normally mixing on a PM10, and I'm here today checking out the new RIVAGE PM3, and I gotta tell you, it's extremely impressive. One of the things I'm excited about is it looks like there's now a desk that's going to be available globally that I can do a fly date with without bringing my entire package. It's so much like the PM10, and it seems to have all the features I'm going to need to do a full-blown show and on a one-off corporate gig, or churches are going to love this thing. You've got some amazing stuff. The channel count is impressive. It's comparable to a PM10. You've got there's really no limits going down from the PM10 to this for me that I can see currently. It's really well thought out, and I'm excited about it. I'm particularly excited to see the PM5 with the 3 screens. I shouldn't probably say that right now because we don't have to look at, but yeah, what a great desk, and they've made some nice improvements.
Hello, my name is Garry Brown. I am the front of house engineer for Fish, Trey Anastasio Band, and Oysterhead. I am here looking at the PM3, the smaller brother of the console that I use. I'm on the PM10, have been for the last 3 years. So I came to look at this fella, and it's impressive. The functionality is basically the same as the PM10. The channel count, I have my show file on this surface right now. No problem at all. With the new DSP, the 3, the PM5, the PM10 can all go up to 288 channels, which is pretty awesome. On Trey Anastasio Band, we do a lot of theaters and clubs and smaller gigs. I have been taking the PM10, which can be pretty tight in some places. So the fact that the PM3 can do my show on a smaller format with the same sound as the PM10, it's pretty much a no-brainer. I can reduce my whole size on front of house, the whole footprint of front of house, instead of fighting for space. I can now fit in.